And thank you so much for joining everyone, those who are present over here and those who are present online. A very good morning from Baku. My name is Sandip Sanmirai. I'm the global lead for WF International for the IFRC and WF Partnership on Nature-Based Solution. So today we are organizing this event jointly with our IFRC colleague, and it's really great that you are all here and those who are also joining us from online. So today we had a great panelist from IOM, from IFRC, and from WF Madagascar. But before going there, I will quickly go through you in terms of a very short presentation. It basically highlights what we have done in our partnership and where we are heading to and some of the updates. But before going into that particular detail, I really want to give you in terms of why we choose nature-based solution for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So just to give you a little bit more context, because of the hazard, because of the exposure, and because of the vulnerability, it will really impact to the people and also to the nature and in overall the biodiversity as well. So as we know, the climate change, whether disaster will drive nature loss, and also from the disaster impact, and also from the nature being damaged from by the human during the disaster response. So that's also one of the really triggering effect how the nature will lose. But having said that, well, by causing nature loss, where climate and weather related disaster will contribute towards more climate change, and similarly also increase, I would say, hazard, and as well as the nature loss, the human impacts, and the climate and weather related disaster will increase exposure, so which is basically increasing much more, making much more vulnerable. But on top of that, let's say by causing nature loss and human impacts and climate weather related disaster will increase vulnerability. So this is a cycle, and we are basically trying to address this cycle in terms of how the nature-based solution will really help to address both the climate and the weather-related disaster. So this is just a phenomena that I just want to highlight. And based on this, in year 2020, initially we started a discussion to have, let's say, our global partnership with IFRC. And Nini is here. She's in the panel. She is one of the, I would say, first person that we work very closely during this, I would say, planning phase. And our partnership really includes 4 key pillars. The first main key pillar is we really want to educate people about how nature really protects both people and the nature itself. So we really want to mobilize our national offices, the national society, in terms of changing the people process so that nature really protects them. And secondly, we really want to integrate the nature into national policy instrument like the NDCs, the NABs, or even the NBSAP, right? So, and we really want to liberate our mandate from as a WWF and as an IFRC or national society to use our mandate to and our expertise to integrate nature-based solution into the national instruments like the NDC, the NABs, the NBSAP, and others, and even UNDRR framework. But beyond that, our third key pillar is also to really implement joint project on the ground. So we really want to implement our joint project in our landscape, in our seascape, and in our cityscape. The IFRC, or the National Society, is present almost every part of the world. I think more than 190 countries. But we as a WWF, we are present in more than 100 countries. So there is a big synergy in terms of where we can really make influence and have a bigger impact in terms of, let's say, implementing project in the ground. We work in the landscape, multi-country, transboundary landscape, and so do the IFRC or the National Society. So we really want to I would say, use our vast network in terms of escalating these issues at the national level or at the landscape level. And then lastly, we strongly believe that we cannot do this work by ourselves. So we need partnership. We need partners like IOM, Chris is here in our panel today, and we need do more resource mobilization. So that's also one of the key pillars that what we thought that we can definitely, and these are the 4 key pillars of our partnership. And to launch our partnership, we produced the first report is entitled Working with Nature to Protect People and How Nature-Based Solutions Address Weather and Climate-Related Disaster. And we launched this on Stockholm Plus 50 in June 2022. And this is one of our flagship reports that we produced over the last year or so. And And since this our partnership is relatively new, in WWF we have global partnership with 3 different organizations. So one with CARE, we call CARE and WWF Alliance, one with Save the Children, and one with IFRC. There might be more in the future, but this partnership is relatively new. It's a little bit more than 3 years old. Also, and over the last 3 years, these are some of the footprint that we were managed to shake so far. So if we look this map, we are in a way already working in 25 countries, but in different variation. For example, there are some these red countries like the US and mostly our global north. They are really trying to raise funding and to implement projects on the ground. So those things are happening, and this is between both WWF and the National Red Cross Society. But there are some, let's say, green color, especially in the Africa and especially in the Asia. There are 6 of those officers who are implementing projects right now in the field jointly with the National Society. So that's also coming up. But having said that, there is bigger interest, much more bigger interest in the other countries. For example, let's say Mongolia or let's say Australia, let's say Canada, where they are really discussing at the national level in terms of how to work together in this partnership and really implement this project and really contribute to the global partnership, a global framework of this partnership. And there is a lot of work ongoing. Let's say, for example, there is, and we also trying to bring the innovative idea into this partnership. For example, in Mongolia, we are discussing how we can really use the technology like drone to plant, let's say, trees into the harsh environment condition in the southern part of the Mongolia. So we are discussing with Red Cross Mongolia, with WWF Mongolia, in very closely coordination with Australia office, both Red Cross and WWF. So these things are really moving forward. But I would say our aim is to go as extensive as we can, but it is taking time, and there are many challenges on doing so. So we will unpack some of those challenges and also some opportunity in the coming, I would say, in the coming session. So with that, I will really want to now go into much more detail, and I really want to invite my esteemed panelists today, and my esteemed panelists today, and we will really discuss some of the issues that what I highlighted just now, and also unpack some of the issues and challenges that as we move forward. So on that note, I would really like to invite Nini Naumen. She is the climate change lead for the IFRC, and I have been working with her for maybe almost 2 decades or so. So it's great to have you, Nini, and she was one of the instrumental in terms of building this partnership with WWF. And secondly, I really want to invite Finuheri Rakadonsaro, if I pronounce that name correctly. He's the conservation director for WWF Madagascar, and he's been implementing projects jointly with Red Cross. So welcome, Fino. And lastly, I really want to welcome Christopher Richard, who is the regional climate action specialist in Asia Pacific for IOM, UN migration. So welcome, Chris. So and thank you so much for all of us for your time this early morning, and we are really looking forward for this very, I would say, the fruitful discussion that we're gonna take place. Great. So yeah, so great. And firstly, so let me start with Chris, for example. Chris, firstly, thank you for joining us and being our guest. I really want to ask a question to you in terms of what are some of the initiatives that the IOM is really working on the climate and the environment environment. So let me start from you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? Is this right? Okay, perfect. No, thanks very much. First of all, good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming so early, and thanks for having IOM on this panel. Yeah, it's a good question, because I think people are sometimes curious as to why the International Organization for Migration is sort of engaged so heavily in these sorts of processes around UNFCCC and climate change and so on. And the answer is really that we're concerned about addressing one of the key human impacts of climate and environmental change, which is, of course, human mobility. And this is an area that we've actually been engaged with since at least the 1990s, actually, when we started to do some of our first research around the links between climate and environmental change and different forms of human mobility, whether talking about displacement, migration, planned relocation, and so on. And you know, we were over that time as well. We sort of built up a fairly strong operational footprint, in particular in the context of our disaster risk reduction type work in many parts of the world. And over time, we've also started to expand our policy engagement in this space as well, including in the context of the UNFCCC, but also broader sort of frameworks as well, like Sendai. The Global Compact on Migration also addresses migration and climate change issues and so on. And we're also one of the, well, actually the first organization that developed or formed an institutional structure or body or mechanism related to climate change and migration. We've also in 2021 established our institutional strategy on migration, environment and climate change, and that's sort of guiding our work up to 2030. And that strategy outlines sort of three broad areas of work where we're particularly active. One is looking at solutions for people to stay where they are, which is sort of a key thing that most of the communities we deal with are concerned about. And this is where a lot of our, you know, DRR work, but also sort of climate change adaptation, resilience building activities come into the equation. The second element is looking at solutions for people who are already on the move. And this is sort of very much primarily about providing humanitarian support and protection to displaced populations as well, who have been impacted by disasters and slow onset processes and so on. But that can also include looking at providing support to existing migrant workers, for example, who are, you know, in a place where they might their livelihoods are being impacted by climate change, or the working conditions or so on are impacted as well. And then finally, we look at solutions for people to move, which is sort of more getting towards the migration policy end of the spectrum and looking at the role of labour migration as a potentially positive adaptation strategy. So that's sort of what, very broadly speaking, what we are focusing on in this space. But the strategy also outlines sort of four key areas that, or sort of means through which we're engaging in these processes. And that includes looking at our policy support. So, for example, I mean, you mentioned NAPs and NDCs, where we're doing a lot of work to try and integrate a human mobility perspective in the NAPs and NDCs. We're supporting governments at the regional level and national level to develop policies and frameworks related to climate mobility. Then there's our operational sort of pillar, again on the DRR adaptation sort of side of things in a lot of our humanitarian work. But we're also looking to be a knowledge provider and also to be a convener on these sorts of issues. So it's where we're bringing in a lot of data and research and so on, and bringing different stakeholders together. And I think that sort of seems aligned with what you had presented earlier in terms of the existing partnership between IFRC and WWF. So that's sort of very broadly sort of what we're about in this space.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris. And I think you really touched some of the critical issues that, whether we like it or not, we will really face in coming days. So, as you know, and as we all know, that the World Bank has released this, let's say, a couple of reports which really highlights that millions of people will be displaced due to climate change. And I come from Nepal, and we have many internal displacement already happening due to climate change. And if you look, let's say, if you look from across the region, from Latin America to Africa and to Southeast Asia, there will be millions of people will be displaced from climate change. And those reports are coming up, and even, let's say, the WIM, the Warsaw International Mechanism, may really try to address some of those elements. And thank you for that highlighting, Chris, and really great that that you're doing such a great work through your organization. Thanks for that. So Nini, let me come to you and ask, because you have been partnering with WWF for the last 3 years, and so what are some of the challenges, or what are some of the successes that you see from this partnership that we are working with WWF from the global level, so from global perspective?
Thanks so much, Sandeep. And maybe just building a little bit on what you were saying, Chris. I think it's indeed, we've also been working on disaster risk reduction as a humanitarian organization. We have been dealing with these issues for a while, but I think it's really the severity of a climate and environmental crisis. Like a decade ago, we're still talking about adaptation in a kind of medium to long-term perspective. Now we're talking about this as something that is happening now. And the severity of that means that we are dealing, and we're literally talking about climate and environment leading to migration now, to food and water insecurity now, to loss of lives now. And so the severity is at that degree that we actually are discussing of loss and damage, which seemed like a pipe dream 10 years ago. That's happening now. Humanitarian organizations are here now at scale because we realize that any of these issues have become humanitarian crises. So we are no longer an organization who prepares and responds to disasters. We need to recover from them. And just the intensity that these happen is not like one flood a year. We're seeing 5 floods a year in multiple countries, hit by a drought, by a pandemic. People are living in a constant crisis, and that means that humanitarian actors also need to be looking at continuous programming, which automatically becomes long-term programming. So we're no longer able almost to distinguish between non-disaster and disaster periods in the lives of communities. And for us to be able to do that, requires us to understand climate and environmental data in a very different way. So in the Red Cross Red Crescent network, we work with 191 national societies, we used to mainly rely on weather data. Now we need to look at seasonal forecasts, longer-term climate projections, and also understand the environmental information in between that's needed to understand what's happening and making communities more vulnerable and finding solutions. And that's why it's so critical for us to work with someone like WWF, because we cannot do it alone. So while we know how to prepare for disasters, how to get people evacuated, how to flood-proof shelter, and that's what we bring to the partnership, we don't understand working at ecosystem scales. Humanitarian organizations are usually driven by the disasters, the localities where disaster hit. Where did the flood happen? Not looking necessarily at what are the causes of a flood, what make communities vulnerable, what are those drivers of environmental degradation at a scale. And so that's been something really critical, has been shifting our mindset to understanding ecosystems, looking at long-term sustainable solutions, because again, we need those solutions now, in a week, in a year, in 10 years, and they're just going to get worse. And really critically looking at issues around maladaptation. So you were mentioning the example of some of the work in, say, Mongolia. If we're looking at, we would be talking about tree planting, we're actually talking about reforesting. For this to be a solution that provides social and economic benefits and reduces disaster risk in the long term, we need to be looking at really protecting and managing these resources, and that's really what our partnership with WWF brings. So I think it's a joint understanding, that joint commitment. Really critical to us is this map that you were showing, Sandeep. So whether we're looking at partnering around in the space of environment and disasters and climate and disasters, it is that local, national context in policy terms. How do we bring NAPs and NDCs together with existing disaster management plans, policies, legislation in place? It's that mind shift, that systems shift, and that needs to happen between us. And that's been one of the challenges we've faced, is understanding each other's worlds. When you were mentioning, for example, seascapes, landscapes, cityscapes, that's not what a humanitarian understands. They're talking about they're talking about floods, droughts, cyclones. So how do we talk about what's the role of seascapes with, say, storm surges? That's where the languages come together. And that understanding needs to be brought to the stakeholders at national level, and us to know each other's organizations nationally, but also the government institutions, the other NGOs in country, the other research institutes, etc., and really critically at community level, because these are different languages, how a conservationist has been working there to restore a mangrove versus how a humanitarian organization has been dealing with cyclones, for example. So I think that's both the successes has been bringing these worlds together and getting initial funding. The challenges has been the same ones. How do we understand those contexts, those tools, the language we speak, and bring those together? Thanks.
Thank you, Nini, for that, and I completely agree with you, because sometimes we as an organization, we are really let's say, surrounded with our own jargons. We talk about landscape and seascape, but definitely we need to engage with you guys, with IOM and others, in terms of to understand, and that there is a lot that we need to do, and definitely this is the new space for us as a conservation organization, and whether we like it or not, as we move forward, the climate change will impact all sectors, and let's say the disaster will increase. The people will migrate from one place to another place due to the forced migrations. The disease will be much more, I would say, pandemic. So we need to address all those issues, and definitely we are also trying our best to understand your language, and also to work with you guys. I think that's really great. So now let me turn to Fino, who is really implementing the project on the ground together with rectors. So, but before going into detail, so Fino, in Madagascar, can you be able to highlight some of the work that you are doing on nature-based solution for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction that you are leading in Madagascar? Can you unpack some of those work that you are doing in Madagascar?
Thank you, Sandeep, and hi everyone. Good morning. We are doing quite a lot of work related to nature-based solution and disaster risk reduction, but I will be talking about our project in the western part of Madagascar, in one of our priority landscape, in the MTB landscape. So we have the mangroves area, one of the biggest mangrove area in the region, in this landscape. It's in the coastal area, but in the upstream of this area, we have also the the dry forest. So it's kind of linked ecosystem in the upstream, and we have the dry forest, we have the watershed, and then in the downstream we have the mangroves. So for the mangrove, the threads are the fuel wood, collection of wood for fuel wood, for timber. In the dry forest, it's mainly due to deforestation conversion to the agriculture. So the situation is the same for the both area, for both upstream or downstream or intermediate area. The communities, they are vulnerable to climate change, for cyclone, flooding. So they are vulnerable, and also I can say that in economic point of view, they do not have economic alternatives to cope with this climate disaster. Another element also is that one of the issue we are also have in this area is the migration, because we have in the south of Madagascar it's a very hard area, and the people from the south move to this area of the project, so it's caused the deforestation in the area. So this is the situation. But what we are doing is that for the mangrove area, we are doing the mangrove restoration and mangrove protection. So mangrove provide the solution as the protection, coastal protection from the cyclone, provides also the livelihoods of communities for the daily life, daily food, fish products. We are also doing the restoration of the watershed and the dry forest. So in order to reduce the flooding, because when the cyclone arrives, there is a big flooding because the watershed and the dry forest area is highly degraded. So we are doing these things. So related to the partnership with WWF and the IFRC, we have this project. We have one project in partnership with WWF France and Red Cross France. And what we have done is that we, WWF Madagascar, we are in charge mainly about the conservation work, restoring mangrove, capacity building of the community-based organization, doing restoration, and also we are also supporting communities in their livelihoods, supporting in the sustainable value chain, beekeeping, and something like that, rice rice farming. It's the work we as WWF we are doing. For the IFRC, for the Red Cross side, they are implementing the disaster risk reduction activities. For example, uh, they are planning to do to develop the disaster risk reduction plan at local level and at regional level. So it will be tools, an essential tools to help communities and stakeholders to cope with these weather-related disaster. So it is, for example, one activities implemented by the IFRC. The second activities is related to the early warning system. So it's it's also some thing I think IFRC bring to the partnership. The partnership it's in an early stage, so we are just starting. We do not have impact yet, but we are already implementing. But what I can say is that this partnership with WWF IFRC is particularly interesting because we as WWF, we care about nature and people. The mission of WWF is that the nature and the people lives in harmony. But we, a conservation organization, our primary focus is the nature. But for IFRC is humanitarian activities. So the primary focus of the IFRC is the people. So I think it's make a very good combination, complementarity in terms of benefit for people and nature. This partnership. The second element is that I can say that we as WWF, by restoring mangrove, by restoring the watershed, we know that we know the nature-based solution. It's working, but nature provides solution, but it takes time. So we are restoring mangrove, but the impact will be in I don't know 4, 5, 6 years. But weather-related disaster is happening now. So for IFRC is mainly I think addressing the short term by developing this disaster risk reduction action plan, the climate insurance, these early warning system. So I think it makes the very good combination of the long term, medium term, and the short term, and I think it's particularly interesting. And the third thing I can say is that what Sandeep showed in the presentation at the beginning, seeing WWF and IFRC working together change the perception of the service provided by nature. So it's show the nature-based solution in a different way. So it's really a concrete example of that. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Fino. I think those are really great and really good to hear what you are doing in Madagascar together with Red Cross and IFRC, National Society, and how you are really implementing this global partnership to the country level. That's really good to hear that. And also you highlighted that nature is our sacred ally. So I think that's really good. So maybe now I will turn to the floor and maybe I will pause one statement. If you agree, please do raise your hand. If you don't agree, then please don't raise your hand. So the statement reads like this. So conserving biological diversity is the most effective solution to protect ecosystem and the people who depends on them. If you agree, please raise your hand. Wow, everybody agrees that. That's really cool. So I think you all are with us. So that's really great. So maybe moving on. Then I will go to Chris. So Chris, for the UN for the IOM, we always see IOM is a deals with the migration, but we are a little bit curious why you are really, I would say, interested in terms of the why it's really important for the IOM to work in the nature aspect. Or so can you highlight some of those aspects in terms of why you are really interested as an organization to work on the nature issue?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'll probably highlight maybe three points. First of all, I mean, a key thing obviously is that we're sort of concerned about the role that environmental factors play as potential drivers of human mobility. But we're not just concerned only with the impacts of climate change per se on, the incidence or severity of sudden onset disasters and so on, but also with the impacts of slow onset processes of climate change and environmental degradation, whether that's caused by people or, natural processes on human mobility patterns. And if you look at the IPCC's 6th assessment report, it provides a fairly comprehensive overview of the latest state of knowledge and data on this topic. And it outlines with a high degree of certainty that climate and environmental factors are acting as both direct and indirect drivers of human mobility. Now, directly, of course, because of the impacts of disasters on displacement, for example, but also indirectly because of the impacts of climate and environmental change on people's livelihoods and so on, in particular, of course, in things like agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and so on, which is then leading people to move. And we have sort of some interesting examples. Of course, I'm from the Asia-Pacific region, or based in the Asia-Pacific region, so forgive me for being a little bit biased towards that part of the world, but in places like Indonesia and Cambodia, for example, we're seeing fish stocks disappearing, which is leading to fisher folk to have to go further afield in order to maintain their livelihoods. But associated with that, we're seeing also incidents of, or increased incidents of, exploitation and abuse of these fisher folk who have to go for long periods of time in sometimes very difficult, challenging conditions and so on, just as sort of one example of the linkages. In places like Mongolia, where we see traditional forms of mobility and sort of the herder lifestyle there is also being impacted, of course, because of the degradation of grasslands and so on, which is, again, leading people to take alternate routes and sometimes going away further and all of that sort of thing, which is also impacting livelihoods in that context. And we've also had, and this is something that even I hadn't really thought about before, to be honest, but some of the research we've done in places like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh have also highlighted, instances of human-animal conflict. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be a massive driver of migration or anything like that, but for some villages, some communities, some households, this is a real challenge that's impacting their livelihoods and sort of forcing people to think about whether or not to stay in their place or move on. A second sort of issue we're looking at is the impact of, the large movement of people on the environment and ecosystems in the place of destination. And again, pointing to Bangladesh in Cox's Bazar, where we have sort of had a massive influx of Rohingya refugees. Studies there have sort of looked at the pre and post influx situation and identified up to, I'm looking at my notes here, 7,220 hectares of forests that have been cleared to support the construction of houses, but also fuel for those populations. So that's quite a key issue. And then, of course, that also amplifies other hazards and risks for those people as well in terms of landslides and flood risk and all of that sort of thing. And the third sort of factor, I guess, or reason is really the flip side of the coin, and is sort of thinking about what role, nature-based solutions, for example, can play in building resilience, improving livelihoods, reducing disaster risk and so on, and thereby also reducing the drivers of human mobility. And we do have activities in different parts of the world as well that sort of look at these sorts of things, in particular in Africa, where we have work around supporting rangeland management, for example, agroecology, and building capacity and awareness around environmental preservation and so on, all with the aim of sort of trying to address some of these drivers or tipping points or factors that can produce human mobility. So that's sort of why we're sort of coming at these sorts of issues.
Well, thank you, Chris, for that. I think it's really great that you are also really walking into that particular space, and that really brings complementarily the work that we are really trying to do. And also, so you highlighted about the migration in terms of in the new location when you go, maybe the nature-based solution will add more added value in terms of safeguarding those vulnerable communities who really move to the new places. So I think that's really good. So maybe, Nina, I will come to you, and since we know IFRC is a humanitarian organization, so why IFRC really want to work on the nature aspect, similar like the IOM. So can you highlight some of those aspects?
Yeah, I think there's obviously some of the similar reasons, and I like it that you highlighted the sixth assessment report of the IPCC, which I think for the first time recognized the climate crisis has become a humanitarian crisis. I think that's like a major driver for the whole sector, actually. And there's this thing called the Climate and Environment Charter for Humanitarian Organizations, which has 400 signatories at the moment, and it's got 140 of which are national societies, and that really shows that as a sector, the thinking has shifted. So I think that's one area. Maybe kind of going more specifically into why nature-based solutions. That's something I was touching upon a little bit earlier on. I think it's really that understanding of the role of ecosystem services. So having food, having water, having shelter is entirely dependent on having healthy ecosystems. So even if your mission is saving lives, you cannot do that without protecting nature. I will say, though, on that statement you referred to earlier on, in reality, when I look at the work we do, coming from an environmental background, I wouldn't call it conservation. I would call it more sustainable management and restoration. So I think that's where the more reasonable, entry points are where there's more buy-in for a humanitarian organization. And the second point is that we're very much a community-led organization. So while we have presence in 191 countries, the real strength is our 190,000 branches. And those branches are, of course, in ecosystems. Like, they are very close to where those natural resources are. And of course, nature-based solutions are really solutions that build on the resources that communities have, that they have access to, that they are stewards of, and that they live on. And so often you build on local knowledge to be able to do and work with nature and to do nature-based solutions. So I think that's another very clear buy-in for us. And another area that is a big thing for the IFRC is our volunteers. So we have 19 million volunteers, many of whom are youth. And I think the whole nature and climate agenda really speaks to youth. And so we had tremendous buy-in. Actually, coming, as I mentioned, from the environment background myself, I was surprised at how easy the buy-in was for nature-based solutions. So I think there's an intrinsic appeal for people around nature and for youth in particular. So it's been something that's been very easy to mobilize our youth and our branches around this has been working with nature. And then the final point, and I'll be blunt on this, I think is finance. The idea that, as I was mentioning in the beginning, we're living in this constant state of crisis means that we cannot be doing pure humanitarian work. We need climate environmental funding and vice versa. Yeah. And I think that for us is the real benefit of our partnership, is we're looking into that nexus of bringing together development finance, humanitarian finance, climate and environment finance. And I think both the negotiations here are more shifting into spaces they weren't in before, starting to cut through that nexus. And also donors. We're starting to see in our dialogues with donors, where we traditionally work with the humanitarian department, coming to the table with the climate department of, say, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. That's something that is very recent. I'd literally see that grow in the last couple of years. So I see that as a really, really real opportunity as well, that then enables us to implement nature-based solutions that have those benefits, not just in the long term. We were talking about that 4 to 5 to 6 year time scale in, say, a mangrove restored in Madagascar. But how do we enable that we're restoring that and have finance for that, but also that we have finance for those early warning systems which can help us to get people off harm's way when, let's say, a storm surge hits that mangrove area that's being restored. And so we need different pots of finance, different actors, but bringing that into a continuum so that they're not different pots. And of course, critically, that all that finance, wherever it comes from, goes to the local level and enables those types of actions that you were describing in Madagascar.
Yeah, thanks, Nini. And I really like the point that you raised about the youth and also the future generation, because whether we like it or not, sometimes I feel really sad, sorry to say that, and very bluntly, that they will face more climate impacts compared to us. So we need to really look into that particular aspect. I think this UNFCCC process had not really talked about the intergenerational equity. Maybe they will slowly come in, but that's also really coming up in the IPCC report. And lastly, you really touched about the funding, about the development and the climate funding. And as we see the NCQG discussion ongoing, the text just came in, so we have to see how that moves on. But if and you and I, we follow the NAPS discussion or even the adaptation discussion, where the many developed countries are talking about mainstream adaptation international into development plans, because they feel that the funding for the adaptation is really, or for the climate is really shrinking down, and they're also looking how to bring the humanitarian money into those aspects. So I think those are really relevant points, and I really echo your sentiments on that part. And maybe now I move back to you, Fino. Since you are already implementing project on the ground with IFRC on the NBS, and the great work is ongoing in the country level, but there might be some kind of challenges that you are facing, because the partnership comes with many challenges as well, and it may not be always let's say a good journey, I would say. So can you be able to highlight some of the difficulties and challenges that what you are facing in terms of implementing this partnership, which is we sign at the global level to the country level, so that we can really be able to identify those. If you can be able to identify those some of those challenges, then we can be able to address those from a global level, if and where possible. So can you be able to highlight some of those challenges that you are facing?
Yeah, I will be talking about challenges, but before that, I will be talking about opportunities for the partnership. I will be opportunities. I think this partnership between WWF and IFRC is really a big opportunity to implement and having impact at scale, because usually as WWF we have our project focused on the conservation or restoration. We have 70 or 80% of the budget on that, and we are doing the disaster risk reduction, but it's kind of about 10% or 20% of our budget in the project. It's the usual WWF project, and I don't know. I assume that for the IFRC, the main focus is in this humanitarian, these activities on the disaster risk reduction and crisis response and cyclone or something like that. Maybe there is also some part of activities and budget, but not too big, and the climate and the environmental, something like that. But I think for this partnership, by partnering WWF and IFRC, we together have a very big, intervention project to be implemented in the field, both really addressing the aspect about the climate, the nature, and the people, because as you've just shared, it's interlinked. Yeah. It's not something closed. So it's really an opportunity to do that. And as you said, finance currently the finance is currently, there is the nexus between these elements. So by partnering, I can say leverage these funding together to implement, to have benefit for both people and for nature, and to reduce this natural reduction. And the second element also is this partnership. I think it's a good opportunity for learning for us as WWF and for the IFRC, I assume, because we are more comfortable in our work on conservation and the restoration of ecosystem, and we are learning with the IFRC with this aspect about humanitarian disaster risk reduction and something like that. And I think it's also the case for the IFRC. So it's interesting. Maybe in terms of challenge, maybe a bit more operational aspect. We have the partnership in Madagascar. The partnership is mainly with Red Cross France, because it's in partnership with the WWF France from the funding from the AFD. But we in Madagascar, we have the Red Cross Madagascar. We also have another Red Cross for another country, Scandinavia, something like that. But we also have the international, the IFRC. So it's the IFRC, the Red Cross, but it's a lot of entities, but sometimes it's not well, I don't know, coordinated. So the teams, they are a bit lost about who is IFRC and Red Cross or something like that. Maybe it could be something to be for us as WWF to improve in the partnership to build only one IFRC for the partnership. But yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Fino, and thank you so much for highlighting some of the difficulties or challenges that you are facing in Madagascar. And I would not say, I think we also need to really understand the IFRC, the federation, and the network. I think that's also one area. And second area, similar by what you highlighted just now, I'm also hearing the similar, I would say, response from our colleague, either from Nepal or either from Philippines or either from Malaysia, for example. And one time, our WWF Nepal colleague told that whenever they go for a meeting with IFRC, there is 2 people from WWF, but there are 10 people from IFRC and the National Society, because there is less Red Cross US, Red Cross UK, everybody coming together, which is good, because that will really bring a lot of diverse view, and we are heading towards common goal. But sometimes from an operational point of view, I think it's challenging. Well, I hope we can slowly learn. The IFRC can learn the way that we work, and we learn the way that what IFRC and the National Society will be working. So, and thank you so much for highlighting that. I hope Nini will be able to take that back home and be able to see how. Yeah, okay, why not, please?
No, I think that's an excellent point, and I'll have to admit that when I joined the Red Cross Red Crescent network myself, I was always surprised that there's always different elements of the movement that we are involved with. There's also the ICRC, so that's an additional player. Maybe they can get involved as well in your work, so you get an extra friend. But what I do like here is that my feeling is always globally, since nature-based solutions is such a big priority for WWF, globally we always come 1 or 2, and you have 10. So I'm happy to hear national level. It's the other way round. We come with 10 and you come with 2 people. But I think that's part of partnerships is indeed the institutional learning and the existing governance arrangements. And obviously what you're talking about is where does decision making sit as well, right? And who are you partnering with? So I think that's a very important lesson, all jokes aside, but it is also about learning how we operate as organizations is a critical part to be able to deliver and implement on the ground. So thank you for raising that honest point.
Yeah, thank you, Nini, for highlighting that. So now maybe I will turn back to audience, and I'll make a statement. It may be a little bit more controversial statement. So if you agree with that, please raise your hand. And if you don't agree, please don't raise your hand. So the statement reads like, we should always focus first on saving lives, then on saving nature. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. That's great. Okay, so there are half of the audience who really agree with this statement, and half don't. I think it's good. So, Chris, do you have anything to say on? You didn't raise your hand.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just sort of wondering, nature is also life, so it's sort of, it's the same thing, really. It's hard, yeah, that's all.
Wow, that's really diplomatic answer. That's really good. And, yeah.
The UN in the house.
Yeah, UN with the heart. That's really good. Okay, so we have almost 9 minutes left. I will really open the floor if you have any questions to ask my esteemed panelists. So if you have any questions from the floor. Anybody? Oh, it's too early. Oh, okay. Please introduce yourselves so that the panelists can know. Yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Will Baldwin Cantello. I work in WWF UK and I'm Director of Nature-Based Solutions. Shall I say that again?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm Will Baldwin Cantello. I work in the UK office of WWF, so I might be one of those 10 people that you're seeing. And I'm the Director for Nature-Based Solutions. I wondered, just looking ahead as this partnership might evolve over time, I'm most aware of the work in Kenya.
Yeah.
Do you see, at the moment we're delivering good nature-based solutions together in important places on grant funding.
Yeah.
Do you see the potential for this to evolve into something that might take a sustainable finance approach in the longer term?
Okay. I think that's an interesting question. And I can take one more question if there is any. Okay, I don't see. So, Nini.
Thanks a lot for that question. I think the idea of the partnership was always that it would be a model. So this postcode lottery funding in Kenya, I think the idea was to replicate it first of all into other regions. I feel slightly justified to answer this question since I was in Kenya a few months ago. Otherwise, I would have just said we'll get back to you. So that's one part of it. I think there's an appetite to grow. Funnily enough, building on your point from Madagascar, since there are multiple actors in country, even if you've now been with British Red Cross, we have interest, for example, from Danish Red Cross, who works in other areas, to also copy the model and spread. So that's one point. I really am interested in that modular approach. In terms of the scope for other types of funding, so Kenya Red Cross is one of our largest national societies, actually, even globally speaking. It's a huge organization. They have actually, I don't know how familiar you are with the work in Kenya. They, for example, run a hotel. They run a restaurant school. They're very open to basically fundraise for humanitarian work. So they're a very innovative organization in terms of sources of funding. So I think there's a lot of scope to look into private sector partnerships, entirely new types of funding, including in country. The other part of the question was if we're thinking more towards also carbon finance. So that's a relatively new area of work for the IFRC network at large, but there are a number of national societies who are interested in branching into that, in particular given our strong interest in reforestation and youth engagement in that. We recently put a study and a scoping out on that, and so that I see is another area where we could explore that type of funding. But thanks for raising that, and I think this goes back homework for us, Sandeep, and I can see Steve in the audience as well. When we're discussing about a phase 2 for the partnership, that's something we haven't given due attention in the phase 1 of the first 3.5 years, and I think that's something, as long as there's appetite, we should definitely heighten on the agenda and give more attention to. So thanks for raising that point.
Yeah. Sure.
Maybe I want to add one point on this question. Currently, and before the partnership, we have developed financial mechanism, sustainable financial mechanism for the conservation by working with private companies. For example, private companies sourcing product in the area, so they have interest that there is resources remain there, and they contribute to for the conservation of these resources. So it's the work we have done before. The things we are doing currently adding for that is that we are also discussing with private companies to provide kind of climate insurance for communities to cope with natural disaster. So it's about the same company, it's about in the same area managing resources, but producer and these communities. We are working to establish this. I don't know if it could be considered as a sustainable funding mechanism, but it's a financial mechanism to help communities to face this weather related disaster as a climate insurance with private sector. But we are in an early stage, and I can say more. I don't know, in few years. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's really interesting. So I think we are now running over with our time. So I will ask any last word or maybe takeaway from this discussion to our panelists. So maybe Chris, any takeaway or last word from IOM side?
Thank you. I mean, I think sort of the vibe of your questions to me is sort of why is IOM involved in this space? But I think hopefully what this conversation has highlighted is the need to sort of break out of our usual silos, whether as conservationists or humanitarians or what have you, because I think there are a lot of issues on which we are sort of working towards a similar goal or objective, even if we're sort of emphasizing different perspectives or different issues. And so, you know, from our point of view, I mean, I know we've been having discussions about the IFRC, WWF, but we've also been involved in, you know, hopefully working towards partnerships in other parts of the world, in Africa. And I would see potential, especially given the map you had earlier about, you know, Asia Pacific as well and other parts of the world where those sorts of partnerships could really come together and we could sort of work across the silos, as we always talk about, and get some useful, productive outcomes.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Chris. And definitely, we have a big work in the Asia Pacific, and we are really trying to grow. And we see a lot of the, let's say, migration issue is also in the Asia Pacific, and we really want to work with IOM on that part as well as we move along. So, Fino, any last word from your side?
Yeah, maybe I've already I've already discussed a lot about how the partnership WWF-IFRC is interesting. But my last word would be for the migration for the IOM. I think when we are at WWF Madagascar, we are doing the threat analysis. The migration is always in the analysis. So migrants are part of the actors of the for the threat we are reducing, threatening the natural resources, and we do not know how to address that. So I think it's particularly interesting to establish the partnership between the WWF, FRC, and the IOM to address this aspect of migration. We already have an ongoing discussion in the Southwest Indian Ocean. I hope it will be moving forward fast. But yeah, I think it's just to raise that the partnership with IOM is really relevant for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Fino. I think you briefly touched about the partnership in the Swahili region with IOM and IFRC. I think there is ongoing work. Maybe we will really land to that particular component, but let's see. So, Nini, just coming back to you in terms of some final words.
Thanks so much. Now, I think I got some definitely new ideas from this event, and thanks for engaging questions and inputs from you. I think a few takeaways from my side is the importance at national level for unpacking mutual understanding and governance arrangements. We've focused so much on the global. What does that look like? And it's very country specific. The funding opportunities remains a critical part, both globally but also in country. And I think it'll look different in every instance. And I love that you mentioned this climate insurance example, something we could definitely look into and learn. Obviously, the value of new partnerships, such as IOM and other actors as we evolve and bringing that to play. And then finally, it's maybe a little bit cheesy, but there's this IFRC slogan about changing minds, saving lives. And I really feel this partnership has been doing that. And so to me, while it's taken time to get to action, actually shifting the way you work, the way the systems are in your organization and how you perceive things, as you were mentioning, Chris, in silos, takes time. And therefore, that's to me, now we're moving to the life-saving part. And I'm happy at where we've gotten to and looking forward to the future. Thanks.
Yeah, and thanks, Nini. And maybe 2 points from my side. From this, I would say definitely we want to work in partnership so that the partnership will really scale the work that we are really doing and be able to, let's say, deliver much more bigger impact. But having said that, we also really want to do a transformative, or let's say, a project. Though the transformative language is a little bit controversial in the UNFCCC process right now, but we really want to do some of the transformative process. And lastly, from AWS side, what we always say, in nature, there is the three key principles. Firstly is don't harm nature. Second is use nature to build people resilience. And third, help nature to build their own resilience. So those are the three key principles from AWS side. So with that note, I would really like to close our session, and thank you so much, panelists, for your great input and the intervention. And thank you, audience, for being with us for our today's session. And thank you all.